Something strange is brewing behind those heavy royal gates, and this time it feels far bigger than the usual whispers of a family in conflict. For years, the world has watched the tension between the Sussexes and the British monarchy unfold like a high-end soap opera. But lately, the tone has shifted from petty disagreements to something far more clinical and far more dangerous. The energy surrounding Buckingham Palace is anything but calm right now, and Meghan is suddenly not carrying the relaxed confidence she so carefully projects online. For a long time, it appeared she was playing her own version of the royal game. Smooth statements, perfectly staged photographs, and those headline-grabbing interviews. It almost seemed as though she believed the rules could be bent, that royal tradition was more of a suggestion than a law carved in stone. The monarchy, however, does not operate on vibes or public relations. It operates on structure, documentation, and 1,000 years of precedent. Reports are now surfacing that the palace has quietly initiated a review that could change everything. But was this a trap all along? Did the palace and William deliberately set a snare for Harry and Meghan, patiently waiting for the moment their carefully constructed narrative would trip over the strict requirements of the crown? Some believe the institution allowed them to walk away to California, fully aware that eventually the paperwork would have to catch up. And if that paperwork does not align with reality, the consequences reach far beyond a PR nightmare. They are existential. Mounting pressure behind the scenes is pushing for the removal of Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet from the UK's royal line of succession until the Duchess provides absolute proof that she carried and delivered both children herself. This is no longer about social media narratives or podcast storytelling. This is about structured documentation and traditions that stretch far beyond modern celebrity culture. The palace has always been a master of the long game. They do not react to headlines, they wait for the archives to settle. For Meghan, who entered this world as though it were a Hollywood set, the realization is likely beginning to sink in. You can rewrite a script, but you cannot rewrite 1,000 years of constitutional law. Imagine believing everything is handled, only to discover that a deeper review is unfolding behind closed doors. That kind of pressure lands differently. This is the story of how the most famous family in the world may be using their oldest rules to settle their newest score, and that was only the beginning. In the world of high-level politics and royalty, silence is never merely an absence of sound. It is a weapon. For years, Buckingham Palace has maintained its ironclad policy of never complain, never explain. But in the case of the Sussex children, that silence has grown deafening. While the internet erupts with theories about surrogacy, medical inconsistencies, and even digitally manipulated imagery, the palace has not offered a single word in response. No statement of support has been issued, and no effort has been made to shut down the swirling rumors. This has led many to ask a pointed question: is the silence a shield, or is it a calculated move designed to let the Sussexes unravel by their own hand? Royal lineage is not built on public appearances or how frequently a couple is photographed at a polo match. It depends on official records, verified details, and processes that have been followed without shortcuts for generations. When Meghan and Harry stepped back from their royal roles, they may have believed they were stepping away from scrutiny. Instead, they stepped into a legal vacuum. One insider has recently suggested that the palace quietly began reviewing internal materials, press releases, medical confirmations, and baptism records, not for the sake of drama, but to ensure that every detail aligns the way it is legally required to. Looking back through royal history, the verified birth of an heir is a non-negotiable requirement. It is precisely why witnesses were historically required to be present in the room during a royal birth. While that practice has since modernized, the underlying legal obligation has not changed in the slightest. The Crown must be certain that children placed in the line of succession are the biological and legal heirs as defined by law. By remaining silent while the public loudly demands answers, the palace is effectively forcing the Sussexes to provide the evidence themselves. It is a passive-aggressive maneuver of the highest order, executed with the kind of patience only centuries-old institutions can afford. And what happened next would shock everyone. The mystery took a dramatic leap forward the moment Harry released his memoir, Spare. In his attempt to be raw and unfiltered, he may have accidentally handed the institution the very ammunition it needed against him. Harry described Archie's birth at the Portland hospital in considerable detail, but medical professionals were quick to flag things that simply did not add up. He mentioned Meghan sitting in a bathtub after receiving not one but 2 epidurals, and to anyone familiar with that medical process, that detail raised an immediate red flag. Doctors will not place a patient in a bathtub following an epidural, due to the risk of infection, the presence of a catheter, and the straightforward reality that the lower body is completely paralyzed. Then came the timeline. Harry claimed they were back at Frogmore Cottage within 2 hours of the birth, and for a first-time mother delivering in a high-security environment, that kind of turnaround is virtually unheard of. It was not just the medical details that felt off. It was the overall tone. He wrote about eating Nando's chicken and inhaling laughing gas while Meghan was in labor, which read far more like a scene from a comedy film than a documented account of a royal birth. People noticed. They began asking whether this was a genuine memory or a story carefully constructed to conceal a different reality entirely. Contrast that with the births of William and Catherine's children. Every time George, Charlotte, or Louis arrived, the couple made a deliberate and very public effort to present their newborn outside the Lindo wing, following protocol precisely because they understood it was what made their children official in the eyes of both the public and the state. With Archie, however, everything was wrapped in a level of secrecy that felt less like a desire for privacy and more like a tactical decision. In the world of royal succession, silence is rarely interpreted as innocence. The paperwork troubles do not end with the hospital accounts. Archie's birth record itself has become a point of serious contention among royal archivists. The original document filed shortly after his birth on May 6, 2019 reportedly listed the mother under her legal name, Rachel Meghan Markle, the standard legally required format for any birth certificate registered in the UK. Then, approximately a month later, something highly unusual occurred. The document was quietly updated, her legal name replaced with her formal royal title, the Duchess of Sussex. In a system built entirely on consistency and tradition, that kind of retroactive amendment is deeply irregular. Royal records are typically precise from the outset, with no requirement for edits after the fact. When doctors, officials, and clerks sign off on a royal birth, that document is considered sealed. So the question that followed was an obvious one. Why did it need to be rewritten at all? Meghan's team reportedly suggested that palace officials made the change without her knowledge, framing her as someone caught in the middle of a bureaucratic error. Others claimed she herself had requested the adjustment to ensure her royal brand was properly reflected in the legal archives. The problem, however, is that when there is no clear paper trail to resolve a discrepancy, the questions do not quietly disappear, they get louder. Meghan's fierce push for privacy may have ultimately complicated matters more than anticipated. The fewer official witnesses involved in a process, the more the institution is left to verify everything independently. It is a textbook case of how seeking total control over a narrative can result in losing control over the facts altogether. And what surfaced next was even more unsettling. If the situation surrounding Archie's birth was complicated, the arrival of Lilibet in California pushed the uncertainty to an entirely different level. Lilibet was born on June 4, 2021, but unlike any previous royal birth, the announcement did not arrive through traditional channels. There was no UK-based royal medical staff connected to the process and no familiar institutional confirmation. The world instead received a press release from a PR team. The doctor reportedly linked to the delivery, Dr. Melissa Drake, was a well-respected professional with a thriving practice in Santa Barbara. Shortly after the birth, however, and precisely as online speculation began to intensify, she reportedly sent a notice to her patients announcing the immediate closure of her practice and her departure from her medical career. That kind of sudden exit, right in the middle of a globally watched royal event, raised eyebrows far beyond royal watching circles. Why would a physician at the peak of her career, having just been connected to one of the most talked-about births in the world, suddenly vanish from public life without explanation? What deepened the intrigue further was the reported detail that her husband runs a prominent fertility clinic. For the segment of royal observers who had long suspected the involvement of a surrogate, this felt like the piece they had been waiting for. To be absolutely clear, no verified proof of these claims exists, but in the absence of information, rumors have a way of becoming a roar that is very difficult to silence. The palace archives reportedly have no direct way to log Lilibet's birth within the established UK system, simply because no standard registry or documentation trail was ever provided to them. There is just a gap where confirmation would ordinarily sit, and in the monarchy, a gap is a risk the institution simply cannot afford to absorb. Just as things appeared impossibly complicated, Lilibet's christening introduced an entirely new layer of confusion. Royal christenings are not family celebrations in the casual sense. They are formal religious and legal events governed by very specific requirements. Traditionally, these ceremonies are conducted under the Church of England, recorded in the official registry, and witnessed by recognized clergy, and those records are not merely symbolic. They actively contribute to maintaining lineage and confirming eligibility within the royal structure. Lilibet's christening, however, took place privately in Montecito, led by Bishop John Taylor of the Episcopal Church. While the ceremony may have carried deep personal meaning for the family, it did not automatically align with the Anglican process the monarchy formally follows. Without an official Church of England record, palace archivists reportedly had no means of verifying the event within the established system, no standard registry, no familiar documentation trail, just another blank space in the ledger. That detail carries far more weight than most people appreciate. The monarchy does not run on personal milestones alone. It depends entirely on verifiable records that match long-standing constitutional precedent. William is reportedly acutely aware of this discrepancy, and if he remains unsatisfied with the documentation, or if question marks persist over DNA or the birth verification requirement, it could eventually trigger a full constitutional crisis. Some believe the only resolution would come through an act of parliament, and for an institution built on centuries of stability, that is the ultimate nuclear option. Because Harry and Meghan have been so fiercely protective of their children's privacy, the handful of photos they have released have been scrutinized to an almost obsessive degree. In an era defined by artificial intelligence and deepfakes, the public has grown acutely sensitive to visual inconsistencies, and observers wasted no time in pointing them out. Some began noting how differently the children appeared from one photograph to the next, with timing, angles, and overall appearance shifting in ways that ignited fierce debate online. In one holiday card, Archie appeared noticeably older than expected, with features that did not quite match photographs released just months earlier. Then came the images of Lilibet. Photography analysts highlighted inconsistent shadows, subtle texture differences, and variations in focus appearing within the same frame, raising questions about whether these were genuine candid moments or carefully constructed composites. Even casual viewers began flagging concerns. The way Meghan held the children in certain photographs looked unusually stiff, as though the interactions lacked natural flow. In the royal world, photographs are never merely personal keepsakes or social media content. They carry institutional weight, functioning as part of the historical record and demonstrating continuity of identity across time. When even a small degree of uncertainty surrounds those images, enormous pressure shifts onto the written and official documentation. And as has become painfully clear, the written documentation is precisely where the most significant gaps exist. While the palace quietly reviews the legalities, Harry and Meghan are confronting a far more immediate threat: the potential collapse of their brand entirely. Their public identity has been built heavily on the premise that they are not simply celebrities, but parents to children who form part of a historic royal line. That connection to the British crown is what transformed ordinary moments into global headlines and gave their personal stories a weight that transcended typical fame. The reality, however, is stark. Hollywood does not tolerate uncertainty. Streaming platforms like Netflix and major commercial partners invest in stability. They need to trust that the product they are funding is exactly what it presents itself to be. No major platform is eager to pour significant budgets into a narrative built on royal heritage if that same foundation could later be challenged or constrained by an act of parliament. The moment the core ingredient of their royal status begins to feel uncertain on paper, the atmosphere around it changes. Investors and partners gravitate toward solid ground, not open questions. Should the palace ever formally confirm gaps or inconsistencies, the public image shifts overnight. Rather than being perceived as members of a historic dynasty, the focus narrows to a high-profile celebrity couple. Influential, certainly, but stripped of that untouchable royal dimension. And that distinction, subtle as it may seem, matters far more than most people are willing to admit. The prestige that once made everything feel exclusive begins to quietly erode, and with it, the leverage that comes with it. Hollywood rarely makes grand announcements when it pulls back. It simply moves differently. Fewer offers, quieter conversations, and opportunities that gradually stop arriving altogether. While public attention remains fixed on the polished gates of Buckingham Palace, the real battle is unfolding somewhere far less glamorous, inside the UK's Home Office and the General Register Office. A royal birth is not simply a medical event. It is a state event. In the United Kingdom, registering a royal birth involves layers of government oversight that ordinary citizens never come close to encountering. For a child to be formally entered into the official line of succession, the Home Secretary is traditionally notified and the records must be completely beyond reproach. With Archie and Lilibet, however, the usual paper trail appears to have hit a series of dead ends. Reports suggest the Home Office has been quietly wrestling with how to categorize these records. When a birth occurs outside the UK, as Lilibet's did, and without the presence of royal medical witnesses, the legal standing of that child's place in the succession enters genuinely murky territory. It is not simply about being the child of a prince. It is about legal delivery as defined by centuries of British law. Some insiders suggest the government is effectively waiting for a formal challenge before committing to any definitive position, which places Harry and Meghan in an increasingly precarious situation. Every day that passes without a clear verified record from UK authorities is another day the palace can claim its hands are tied by administrative procedure, a legal stalemate in which the institution has all the time in the world, and the Sussexes are steadily running out of it. To understand why the monarchy is so methodical about proof of delivery, you have to travel back to 1688 and one of the most explosive scandals in royal history, the warming pan scandal. Rumors spread that Mary of Modena, wife of King James II, had smuggled a fake baby into the birth chamber inside a warming pan to secure a Catholic heir to the throne. The scandal was so destabilizing that it helped ignite a revolution. From that moment forward, the monarchy developed a deep institutional terror of any uncertainty surrounding a royal birth. For hundreds of years that followed, the Home Secretary was literally required to be present in the room, or directly next door, during a royal birth. While that specific rule was eventually relaxed, the demand for absolute verification never was. The palace is not simply being difficult with Meghan. It is following a survival blueprint forged in the aftermath of a revolution, built on the understanding that if the lineage is even slightly questionable, the entire foundation of the monarchy risks crumbling beneath it. By choosing to forego traditional witnesses and UK-based medical teams, the Sussexes did not simply choose privacy. They chose to step outside a protective legal circle that has existed for over 300 years. And stepping back inside that circle is not a matter of public relations, it is a matter of law. This brings us to the man many believe is the quiet architect of the current freeze-out, William. While Charles is frequently portrayed as a father seeking reconciliation, William is the future king focused entirely on the survival of the institution. Sources close to the Prince of Wales suggest his position is straightforward. If the rules apply to his children, they must apply to Harry's without exception. William's children were brought into the world under the full weight of traditional protocol, signatures from doctors, witnessed announcements, and a clean and unedited paper trail. For William, allowing any deviation from those standards is not a family gesture. It is a dangerous precedent. Permitting Archie and Lilibet to remain in the line of succession without standard verification does not just raise questions about them, it weakens the legitimacy of the entire system. Rumors from within palace walls suggest William has been the most forceful voice pushing for a documentation-first approach. He has no interest in the drama surrounding it. His focus is entirely on the ledger. By insisting on a rigorous review of the records, he has effectively shifted the burden of proof back to Montecito, and it is a tactically brilliant move. If Harry and Meghan produce the proof, the mystery is resolved. If they cannot, or choose not to, the institution will have a clear legal basis to move forward without them. What the Sussexes are discovering, at the end of all of this, is that Hollywood fame and royal status are two entirely different currencies. Fame is constructed on what people choose to believe. Royalty is built on what the state can formally prove. As the internal review continues behind closed doors, the world watches a high-stakes game of constitutional chess play out in slow motion. The palace holds the board, the pieces, and the clock. All it has to do is wait for the next move. If you want to stay ahead of this story and see the documents at the center of all this tension, make sure to watch our next deep dive right here, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because the truth about the Sussex lineage is only just beginning to come to the surface.